I just read my Dreams of Dust story, The Girl Who Never Sleeps, and I wanted to read my other story from Imagine That. We've got Watson here who's chewing his bone, and this is Bear, so you'll see them in my videos a lot. But Imagine That was my first story. I just read my Dreams of Dust story, The Girl Who Never Sleeps, and I wanted to read my other story from Imagine That. We've got Watson here who's chewing his bone, and this is Bear, so you'll see them in my videos a lot. But Imagine That was my first short story that I ever got published with a small printing press, Treasure Ink Press. Found them on Facebook. It was really cool. There was a group of all of us that kind of collaborated and made this book possible, and it was nice because I sent it to them and they did the cover and everything, and it looks really great. So mine is called The Heart Healer. Here's the blurb. To everyone else, Lily was just a normal 15-year-old girl whose parents were genius scientists. Unbeknownst to others, Lily was a cardiac patient who suffered from anxiety and was going to require surgery to live. As her condition worsened, she struggled through isolation as others began to see her non-normal side and avoided her. Lily was alone and scared until one fateful day she came across a dog that changed everything. Join Lily in her journey to freedom as she undergoes a strange adventure that ended up changing a million lives. I'm a cardiac patient and I love dogs, and this story just means a lot to me. So enjoy the white noise. I've got the fan going on here, and sit back and close your eyes and listen to this story. And I love the little heart with all the dog paws for my story. It's super cute. Okay. 1. The day that everything changed. I sat on the steps of my school and watched as the other students laughed with each other, swapped handshakes, and all got on the bus or went to their cars. By this point, even though I'm only 15, being an outsider is something I'm used to. I can't blame them though, it's hard to understand what I go through every day. I suppose I'll start from the beginning. Hi, my name's Lily and I'm 15 years old. My hair is a light brown color and my skin is pale. I love to wear athletic clothes and jeans with sweatshirts, which is unusual around here. I live in a small suburb in Theo, Ohio, where the weather is always sunny and 75 with very few rainy days. Theo is a unique suburb because we have many different kinds of foliage, trees, and rules that aren't typical to most neighborhoods around here. If you walk down the streets, you'll notice a quaint symmetry among the houses. There are only 2 differences that you can find when looking at them. One difference is that each house alternates in color. As you look at them, you'll notice they range in color from dull green to pale blue to yellow to a pale brown. As you look at them, you'll notice they range in color from... Just read that. This color scheme repeats down the road on each side. The second difference you can notice in the houses is the size. Some houses are 1 story, while others go up to 4 stories. I was lucky because my parents were able to afford one of the only 4-story houses on this block. If you bought a 4-story house, you were lucky because you were able to have a flat roof that you could sit on and overlook the whole town on one side. The other side, all you could see were trees from the forest. This is because even though we had a 4-story house, the redwoods and willow trees were up to 50 feet tall and covered all the airspace. Each house has the same tall willow tree planted on the right side in the front yard. Each house has a front yard that consists of 1 acre and has concrete driveways. All the backyards are 1.3 acres. Each backyard has a dark brown wooded fence that is 2 stories tall and was built with the houses when this town was created. Behind the wooden fence on my side of the street was a 20-acre forest filled with redwood, ash, and willow trees. When the developers conceived this town, somehow they were able to plant this forest of trees and keep them alive. I only say that because normally redwoods and willow trees can't survive next to each other because the willow trees and redwoods need so much water by themselves. They used science to make this work. My mom was a part of the project, but all I know about it is that she helped create these trees so they could live here like that. My favorite days used to be when I could sit on the roof and see the sun poke through the tree lines. I used to invite my friends, but now I just enjoy being alone. I think it's just better this way. It's easier to be alone. There are 5 other kids from my school who live on this block with me. Brett is my age and can easily be described as tall, dark, and handsome. He gets all the girls in my class. Chloe, who's 14, is his girlfriend. She's this beautiful African-American girl with short black hair. She's always dressed in the latest trends, but is still one of the most athletic girls in the school. Jess, surprisingly not short for Jessica, is my age and is a pale redhead with more freckles than you can imagine. Chuck, who is 10 years old, is Brett's little brother. He's super short with black hair and tan skin. The last girl that lives on my block is Lola. She's my age as well and is one of the braver kids in our school. She has blonde hair and a pixie-style haircut and is always trying to con kids into doing things they shouldn't for some type of game she's made up. I met them all on the street when we first moved to this development 2 years ago. I started school as a new kid since I left my old life back home in California. At first, when I moved here, we all got along. We used to play kickball in the street, run in the forest, and have game nights at my house. But that all changed after the night they saw the real me. See, my heart doesn't work well. Yes, the one beating that is in your chest. When I was 10, I was running around and playing on a trampoline in our backyard when my heart suddenly started beating faster than it ever had before. I started breathing fast and crying, my ears started buzzing so loud I couldn't hear much, and my dad ran out to see what was wrong. It sounded like he was talking to me through a tunnel. Then my vision got blurry and the edges of my vision went black. Next thing I felt was my dad scooping me up. When I awoke, I was in the hospital and my mom and dad were talking to some doctor. They said I had atrial fibrillation, which means my heart can go up to 170 beats per minute randomly. This happens because the upper chambers of my heart don't talk to each other properly, and this causes my heart to beat weirdly. They said that there was no cure and that if it gets worse as I get older, I will have to have open heart surgery. Even though I was diagnosed when I was 10, I could still act like a normal kid most days. Sometimes, though, I have an episode where it beats out of control and causes me to pass out. Then, when I wake up, it sends me into a panic attack, causing me to hyperventilate until I almost pass out again. For 4 years, it only would happen a few times a month. Normally, I would only pass out when I was really tired, but this day, the day that changed everything, was just a bad day, I guess. It was about a year ago now. Lola, of course, had made up a new game that we were playing in the forest. It was a silly game, but we were running out of games to play. In this game, who was ever named the Crumpet, Lola, had to collect small rocks and sticks. The traitor, Brett, was the one who was able to talk with the Crumpet and make a deal for them. If the Crumpet didn't like the deal, then she'd be able to chase the runners, that's me, Chloe, Chuck, and Jess, and throw the rocks and stick at us until she ran out of what was in her hand. While Lola had collected all her rocks and sticks and called the traitor to her. For her 12 rocks and 2 sticks, he offered her 2 of his shoes. Brett's shoes are really smelly, so I don't blame her for not taking the deal. She said no and yelled, "Run!" I was feeling tired that day, but not too exhausted. I was laughing with Jess and Lola, laughing with Jess until Lola spotted us. We started running in between the redwoods and willow trees. This particular part of the forest only has these 2 trees. This is when it happened. The last thing I remember is looking over my shoulder and seeing Lola throw a long stick at me. I leaped left to grab a branch of the willow tree, and then the next thing I know, I'm looking up and seeing all of them standing over me. Then my panic attack hits. All of a sudden, it felt like a vacuum cleaner was sucking all of the air out of me. My chest got so heavy it didn't feel like I had enough strength to even try and breathe in the air. My legs and arms began to tingle. Next, the hyperventilating kicked in. I tried to purse my lips so I could breathe better, but it didn't work. Before I could stop them, my cheeks were wet with tears. This is the worst part. Why does my body do this? I thought. I closed my eyes to try and focus on my breathing and grounding. I straightened out my legs and put my hands on the ground. I dug both palms into the dirt. It had rained a few days before, so the soil was moist. I felt a stick in my right hand. I tried to focus on it. That must have been the one that Lola had thrown at me. Finally, I'd started to feel some relief in my chest. My breathing was starting to slow down. Tears were still streaming down my face, but now it was from relief and not fear. Now a new emotion came to the surface. Embarrassment. Thoughts started racing through my head as I sat on the ground, still holding the stick. What are my friends going to think? I wish they never saw this side of me. I never told them anything was ever wrong with me. They've never seen this at school because I would always be calm during recess and was always sitting during class. For all they knew, my heart was fine. If I was having a bad heart day, Mom and Dad would just let me stay home. See, my mom and dad weren't around much. My mom is a genetic developer, which meant she developed genes that would make something new and modified. For example, our town hired her to genetically change the trees so that they could all survive here. She made the redwoods get up to 20 feet tall and 15 feet wide. The willow trees to be 10 feet tall and 5 feet wide, with full blossoming branches that created even more of a waterfall effect. And pine trees that were able to survive planted in between the redwoods and the willow trees, just working at a new genetic laboratory that is actually part of the development we live in. My dad is also a scientist and works at the same laboratory as my mom. They work in TMO, trees that are modified organisms. Dad is in charge of the laboratory and the finances they do. He basically gets the laboratory work and makes sure my mom is always kept busy. Since they're on the same schedule and doing research like this, I'm normally home alone. Therefore, when I have bad days, they trust me to trust my instincts and my body to get through it. If I need a note from school, they just scan one over to the school on that day instead of coming home to check on me. Most people are surprised when I tell them that my parents are scientists because they don't look like it at all. My mom's name is Tracy and my dad's name is Bill. Mom looks similar to me. She has an athletic build and is 5'5" with short brunette hair. She used to weightlift and play basketball before she got consumed by her work. Dad's 6'2" and bald with a long gray-brown beard and is built like a lumberjack. They met during a weightlifting meet when they were younger and found out that they went to the same colleges. Harvard-Ear alumni. Anyways, back to me. My friends were really nice to take me on the walk back to the house after my episode in the forest. Chloe and Lola walked beside me and tried to rub my back and kept asking me if I was okay. They didn't ask what happened, and they didn't pry to find out more. I was grateful at the time. I thought they would stick by my side, unlike kids in my past. As predicted, though, they all left me eventually. Once I got home, I talked to my parents and told them what had happened. Since this wasn't a usual circumstance and my fainting and panic attack occurred without a trigger, they let me stay home the next day from school. 2 days after my episode, I was back in school. I was a little embarrassed after coming back and walking into school. Our school is pretty big and has large glass windows all along the front. It opens right into a large cafeteria where kindergarten through 12th grade sit. Branching off the cafeteria were various hallways leading off into classrooms. The first hallway on the left when you walked in was for first graders. The second hallway was for second graders, and so on until you were looking almost all the way to the right hallway where the 12th graders sat. The gym and administrative offices are in a separate building that is connected through the 12th grade hallway. The gym has 4 volleyball courts, 2 basketball courts, and a large lap pool. Then behind the gym are the softball, soccer, and football fields. In between the school and the gym is the playground where we all have recess. It's a large school, but I guess it used to be smaller. When Theo built this TMO community, they decided to renovate the school as well and created what we go to now. There I go, going off topic again. Anyways, so there I was walking through the clear double glass doors on this sunny day. Embarrassed about what happened and dreading seeing my friends. To make me feel better, I wore my favorite all-red plain sweatshirt and black leggings so I was comfortable. As I opened the door, I turned back to face Mom and waved goodbye as I watched her drive off in the new red Subaru. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath before returning to open the second set of glass doors as I prepared to see the people in the cafeteria. Mom and Dad had to work this morning, so I was dropped off at 12 p.m., which was the time that grades 7 through 12 are being released for lunch and recess. Mom already faxed in my note that I was sick the day before and going to be tardy today, so I was allowed to go straight to lunch. I bravely lifted my head and looked to my right towards the 9th graders' table. I sighed a breath of relief when I didn't see my friends at first. I put my backpack down in a cubby by the door and headed to the lunch line to grab some food. Then I noticed them ahead of me in the lunch line. After a few minutes went by, they still hadn't noticed I was behind them. I then caught a glimpse of Chloe as she turned around to look at something. We made eye contact and my heart leapt. She looked like she had a hint of a smile. Then it was weird. Lola noticed her looking at me, quickly grabbed Chloe's arm and turned her back around to face the front of the line. Lola looked at me for a second and then looked away right after that. She didn't have a smile on her face. In fact, it looked like she had just seen a monster. Lola went and whispered something to Brett and Jess. They replied in hushed tones but didn't turn back to look at me. I started feeling anxious while I finished going through the lunch line. I didn't feel very hungry, so I just grabbed a bowl of tomato soup and oyster crackers. After I got to the end of the line and paid, I turned to go towards our usual table. I noticed they didn't go to sit there. We normally sat at a round table behind the 8th graders. Instead, they were sitting at the packed long table by the other 9th and 10th graders. There was no more room for me to sit there. My palms felt sweaty under the tray. It felt like I was going to drop it. I went to our usual table and sat there alone instead of trying to find room at their table. I had a feeling they didn't want me around. The rest of the day dragged along. I kept my head low as I walked to each class until it was time to go home. The story of what happened to me spread around the entire school. Everyone who didn't know me was staring at me, and everyone who did know me turned away. Since Mom dropped me off, Dad picked me up instead. I waited until everyone mostly cleared out of the hallway and cafeteria before I left through the double doors. I just didn't want to deal with people anymore. As I walked out, Dad was sitting in his emerald green 4-door truck by the parent pickup spots. I got in the truck silently and put my backpack on the floor without looking at him. I stared out the window as we started to pull out of the parking lot. The school looks so different now. Instead of a warm, inviting place, it looks like a cold, desolate, fearful building. Dad patted me on the head and said, "You okay, kiddo?" "Yeah, I'm okay," I said. He looked at me again with concern and asked if I was feeling all right. I nodded my head while faking a small smile. That seemed to satisfy him. He patted me on the back and said good while we continued on home. Chapter 2. The New Gate. Since that day, it's been a full year. I wouldn't call them friends anymore, but the kids that I used to be friends with don't even look at my house when they walk by. My heart condition has gotten so bad that my episodes occur almost daily. The cardiologist met with me and my parents last week and said that if I didn't get the surgery soon, I was going to die. It was about 5 months ago when my episodes tripled and my parents took me out of school to homeschool me. I actually like it better this way. Now I don't have to deal with people staring at me and wondering if I'm going to drop dead or avoiding me because they're scared of me. Some people think I'm faking it. Others just don't know how to act because they've never seen or dealt with anyone that has had medical issues before. Since my parents are never home long enough to teach me, I follow this homeschooling program that is offered online for medical patients who are unable to attend in-person school instead. Because it's always nice out, I'm always attending school on my laptop while sitting on the roof. Our roof is a flat tan color that has several drainage systems on each side so that when it does rain, the water drains off the roof into underground tubs and then into the forest. This keeps the yards from flooding. We have many redwoods that my mother created that sit in pots and alternate with tiki torches to help keep the bugs away. The potted redwoods and tiki torches are only at the front of the roof facing the street and on the two sides of the house that face other houses. The back view is left open so we have a clear view of the forest. Since I've started being homeschooled here, my parents set me up a desk with an outlet on the floor of the roof that's covered so I can plug my laptop in. Sitting in the sun doing schoolwork helps me with my fear and makes me feel happy. Plus, you can't beat the smell of fresh air and the view of trees from this high up. Sometimes I wish they didn't leave me all alone when dealing with my episodes, but I was told to be brave, so I have to. When I have episodes during the day, I have a button I can press, and this calls my older neighbor over who used to be a paramedic. He has the key to the house and makes sure that I'm okay. This helps me feel a little safer. So far, he's never let me down. For a 70-year-old man named Juan, he sure does move fast. Plus, he always brings me popsicles, which are my favorite snack. When my episode starts, I normally have 5 minutes before I pass out, which gives me plenty of time to press the button and sit down on the cushioned couch designed for my episodes. That way I don't fall and hit my head on a hard surface. Juan normally gets here when I'm just starting to hyperventilate, so it really helps me feel comfortable with what I'm going through. I normally go to school from 8 in the morning to 3 in the afternoon. My parents usually get home around 6 or 7, so I have a few hours to play before I have to help Mom with dinner. Since I play by myself, my favorite thing to do is to go in my backyard and garden or draw on the fence. My mom bought me paint while it washes off so I can paint on the fence and then just wash it off when I'm done. The paint is washable for up to 2 days, so if I like what I painted, I leave it up for Mom and Dad to see before it's cleaned up. I used to play basketball down the street or go running before they got home, but now the risk is too high, so I have to do activities that keep my heart rate low. Today I decided I was going to paint an elephant and a flower field on my fence. I closed my school laptop and went down the stairs barefoot into the kitchen to grab a cold glass of water from the fridge. Then I grabbed a protein bar from the cupboard and set them outside on the red wooden picnic table. We had a patio out back where we kept lawn furniture and a picnic table for outdoor parties. My mom and dad like to have their work friends over, so whenever they have a big accomplishment at work, so pretty much like every few weeks they're throwing a party. There's always something new they've developed that they want to celebrate. Once I put my food and drink down on the picnic table, I went over to our garden shed. It's newer like our house, so it's pretty nice inside. It has a pale green metal sliding on it with a tan roof and a concrete floor on the inside with shelves lining both walls. The left side and back of the shed were all for the gardening tools and Dad's tools for house maintenance. The back right side of the shed is where all my paint supplies were kept. The shed was temperature controlled at 65 degrees, so my paint was never ruined. I grabbed the gray, purple, green, and black buckets of paint along with a few paint brushes and headed to the back of the fence. Every time I painted, I would choose a different part of the fence. Doing this made me feel more spontaneous and fun. Today I thought it would be nice to paint the center of the back fence. That way when Mom and Dad got home and looked through the kitchen, it'd be the first thing they'd see. I set my paint buckets down and paint brushes on top of them. I had one small paintbrush for the fine features, a medium paintbrush, and a large paintbrush to do the brunt of the work. I went back inside the shed to grab a blanket and another bucket to fill with water so I could wash my paintbrushes in between colors. When I came back out of the shed, I looked back toward the fence and was very confused. Our fence, that has no doors on it, so no one can enter. Now has a square door right where I was about to paint. You almost wouldn't notice it if there wasn't a huge black doorknob attached to the left side of it. I stood outside the shed holding my blanket and bucket that has no water in it yet and looked around confused. No way was that there before, I thought. I slowly stepped towards the door. I could feel the grass prickling my feet as I walked along. I kept looking around in case someone jumped out at me. Maybe someone installed the door and had it put the knob on last, and my parents forgot to tell me about it? No, I thought, that still doesn't make sense. Mom and Dad always leave me notes if someone's going to be coming in the house or doing any kind of work when I'm done. I looked up and saw that the sun was shining bright like it was noon instead of 4 p.m. Normally at this time the sun was low enough that it wasn't coming into the backyard at all. This is weird, I thought to myself. My heart started to beat a little faster, which then started my anxiety going. Going to be fine, I whispered to myself. I stopped walking and felt the cold earth under my feet. I took in a deep breath to calm down. I opened my eyes again and realized I was standing right in front of the door all of a sudden. I took another deep breath and reached for the black doorknob. Oddly, the door was my exact height and only about 4 feet wide. I grabbed the door handle. It was as cold as ice. I let go due to the shock of the temperature of it. I looked around once more, bucked up my courage, and grabbed the doorknob again. Turning the knob felt like spreading butter on toast. It was so smooth. I stood there with the door wide open and looked through it. Well, that was anticlimactic, I said aloud to myself. Chapter 3, A New Path. It's just the forest. Mom and Dad must have had someone come and put in a door in the fence, and I missed them doing the work. That had to be the answer. I shrugged my shoulders and figured I'd just walk through anyways. I didn't bother to put shoes on either because I loved the feel of the earth. It reminds me that I'm alive from everything that I can feel. I noticed after I was about 5 feet from the door that the wind suddenly picked up. The sky was clear, so a storm shouldn't be coming. I looked around and noticed the door was now shut. The wind must have shut it, no biggie, I thought. I stood still for a moment to enjoy the warm breeze flowing through my hair. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. The smell of the forest never changes. The tree scent smells just like grass that's been freshly mowed, and there's always a strong smell of dirt and humidity to go along with it. When I opened my eyes back up, I noticed there was something shining through the trees. It looked like it was coming from close to the ground and had to be a mile or so away. I stuck my toes in and out of the dirt while I pondered what it might be. I took a couple steps and noticed there was a sandy pathway to my right up ahead that looked like it led to the area that was shining. How odd, I don't even ever remember a sandy pathway being back here, I whispered to myself. Maybe they did a whole landscaping job when they put the door in? Since Mom and Dad wouldn't be home for a while, I figured it wouldn't hurt to go on a little adventure and to see if I could find out what was glittering in the distance. I walked up to the pathway and slowly put one foot and put it in the sand. The sand was extremely soft under my foot. It was a pleasant surprise. I started walking at a slow pace, digging my heels into the sand as I walked along, looking around, enjoying the nature. I noticed the birds were singing extra loud today. It was like listening to a symphony. A half an hour went by, and I started to worry if I should turn back. The glittering spot didn't look like it was getting any closer. What if I have an episode? I looked up at the sky and saw that I could still see the sun. Maybe I haven't been walking out here as long as I thought. I figure once the sun gets closer to disappearing is when I'll head back. After 15 more minutes, I notice the shining spot is getting bigger. I pick up my pace from excitement. I want to run, but I'm too scared it will make my heart beat uncontrollably. I control my breathing as the shining gets bigger and bigger. The willow trees are getting thicker and starting to surround the sand pathway. It starts to be completely shady as I have to keep moving the willow tree branches aside to keep going. At one point, it was similar to pushing aside a thick veil. I kept going for another minute when the willow branches started thinning, showing a lot of glittering through them. I must be close. I pushed the last veil of branches aside to reveal a large opening with a crystal blue lake in the middle. It's bright enough in this opening to make me think it's noon again and not 5 p.m. The sky is clear blue with a few puffy clouds. The lake is shining so brightly from what seems like the sun even though I can't see it. I take in another deep breath and notice the smell of the ocean. I am baffled, yet intrigued at what I found. Come on, inside. Go on, go. Good girl. am baffled yet intrigued at what I've found. There's no way someone built all this in a day, I say aloud. I walk up to the lake and see a pasture full of flowers on the left side that come up to my waist. The right side of the lake looked like a freshly mowed lawn. Even though I'm confused, I kept walking toward the lake. It looked so inviting. Maybe I'll stick my feet in and wash them off and take a drink of water. I am thirsty after all. I've been out here for at least an hour. The sandy path breaches out to make a small beach that goes all the way around the lake. I dip my toe in the water to see how cold it is. It doesn't even feel like anything. The water must be the same temperature as the air. I go ahead and put both my feet in. It happened as soon as I put my feet in. My heart started beating out of control. I was having an episode. My heart speeds up to what feels like 1,000,000 miles an hour. Oh no, what if I die here? Will anyone even be able to find me? I thought with the fear building up inside me. I start to panic, which makes my heart beat even faster. It feels like it's trying to break out of my chest. Tears gently roll down my face as I try to catch my breath. I'm so scared. It gets harder to breathe as my vision starts to go black. The hyperventilation is starting, except for the first time ever, my chest hurts too. It's like I swallowed 1,000,000 bees and they're stinging me from the inside trying to get out. I grab my chest and close my eyes while the world starts to feel like it's falling away from me. Then, out of nowhere, for the first time ever, everything suddenly stopped. My episode disappeared and my breathing went back to normal. I felt good. I slowly opened my eyes and realized there's something underneath me. In between my legs was a dog looking up at me. Chapter 4, A New Friend. The dog was as tall as my knees, had an all-black face and ears with a white nose, and painted on eyebrows that were brown. It was looking up at me and leaning into my left leg. It was so cute, but where did it come from, and how did I not feel it come underneath me? It opens his mouth as if to smile at me, and I felt it start to shake like it was wagging its tail. Sure enough, I turned around and see an all-brown tail wagging back and forth. I reach down to pet it, and it reaches its head towards my hand. As I pet its head, I notice how calm I feel. Can't remember the last time I felt this calm. I back out of the water because I notice it's starting to get cold. The dog stays where it's at. I get on the beach and sit down in the sand. I call the dog to me to see if it'll get out of the water. It turns around and slowly starts coming towards me. I notice it's a girl dog. Never seen any other dog like her. She looks like she's not quite an adult dog, but not a puppy either. She must only be a year old or so. Besides her face and tail, her whole torso is black, and then her legs are fully brown with her paws being full black again. She prances toward me with her pink tongue sticking out of her mouth, looking as happy as a dog could ever be. I start to notice my anxiety coming back and get an instant rush of adrenaline. I start to tear up in the split second that I feel the anxiety. Scared that my heart was about to have another episode and worried that, in case this dog isn't as friendly as she looks, that something terrible will happen to me. Before I could think any more, she sat down right next to me and sat her head on my shoulder. Instant calm came over me again. I felt completely at peace. This was so strange, but I was thankful she was here. I sat there for another 10 minutes to make sure I was feeling okay and then slowly started to stand up. The dog stood up on all fours with me and looked at me smiling. It was the kind of smile a mother would give her child. It was foreign yet comforting to me. I suddenly felt very attached to her. I'm going to see if Mom and Dad will let me keep you, I say to her. Hi, pretty girl, do you want to come home with me? For a second I thought she nodded. She started wagging her tail excitedly and rubbed herself along my leg. I think I should name you, I said to her. What about... I dragged the word and paused for a minute trying to think of cute puppy names. She then sat on my foot and a name immediately popped in my head. Savior. How about I call you Savior? Would you like that? She gazed up and back at me from my foot with a smile of approval. Okay, Savior it is. Let's go home, huh? She got up off my foot and walked to the path before I got there. It's like she already knew the way to her new home. I let her walk in front of me and lead. She stopped to get some nice ear scratches every once in a while, but otherwise kept going. Somehow the sun was still up. I've lost track of what time it possibly could be. I'm pretty sure there's no way the sun should still be up, though. I shrug my shoulders at this thought, and my mind goes silent as I follow Savior on the path. For the first time in a long time, thoughts of my cardiac episodes weren't filling my mind. I felt peace and contentment just listening to the birds and following my new dog home. Finally, I can see my fence. She walked up to the fence and sat down. She is such a good dog for a stray, I think to myself. I grabbed the doorknob of the mysterious door and opened it. Savior went through first and then me. I walked through and everything instantly went dark. I was stunned. standing there barefoot in my grassy backyard. All of a sudden, it was night out. The full moon was right above me and the stars were out. Something weird is going on, I thought. I turned around to shut the door, but it was gone. The fence is completely whole again. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath in. The world once again went dark. When I opened my eyes, my parents were sprinting out of the back door towards me. Xavier stepped out from in front of me and went to my left side instead opening a path for them. She leaned her head onto my leg. "Where have you been?" Mom hysterically yelled at me. Dad grabs me and hugs me without saying a word. Mom starts crying. "We were so worried. Where did you go? It's midnight and your paint supplies were out by the fence, but you were nowhere to be found. We even called the police to start a search party." "Bill, go inside and call the search party off." Dad ran back into the house without saying a word to me. Mom hugs me too and then notices the dog beside me. She kissed me on the forehead and then took a step back. For some reason, my gut was telling me not to tell them what happened. Feels like a magical dream just happened, and if I tell the truth, I'm afraid Xavier will disappear. I looked down at Xavier and then up at my mom. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I was going to paint and then got distracted because I heard something behind the fence. When I went out into the forest to check what it was, I found this dog. I was gone for so long because it took me a while to chase her down and get her to come to me. But then after I did, she was super sweet and cuddly. Can we keep her, please?" She looked at the dog and approached her. Xavier didn't leave my side but wagged her tail and gave my mom the same smile she gave me. My mom looked a bit taken aback at first, but then went up to Xavier and started petting her. "Well, I suppose if your father agrees, we can talk about keeping her." Just as she said that, Dad came walking out of the house. "They called off the search, Tracy. We have to go into the police station tomorrow to sign the report to close it out, but no harm done otherwise." He turned and looked at me and then the dog. Mom went up to him and quietly told him what had happened while I stood there with my hand on Xavier's head. Dad looked displeased and concerned. Him and Mom both walked up to Xavier and checked her out. "Well," he grunted, "she seems friendly enough. We will put out a notice around the community that a stray was found, and if no one claims her within the next 2 weeks, you can keep her." I let out a sigh of relief. "I'm not worried anyone will claim her. I have a feeling she was meant for me." "Okay," I say as I smile at them. "Go inside and get her a bowl of water and leave her out some meat from the refrigerator until we can go to the store tomorrow and pick her up some dog food." Mom stated as she pet Xavier. I nodded and started walking into the house. Xavier calmly followed without any prompting. I grabbed the door handle and opened it in the kitchen as Xavier followed me in. She gladly accepted the water and lunch meat that I left out for her. I should probably shower before I get into bed, I thought to myself as I started going upstairs to my bedroom. I looked down at my legs and feet, and they were completely clean. How is this possible? I was in the forest all afternoon. You'd think my legs and feet would be dirty. It was like I never left the house. Considering how tired I was, I didn't fight the thought and just accepted that I was clean. I decided to sleep with my door closed in case Xavier tried to go out and get into anything. I opened the door into my bedroom and waited for Xavier to come in before closing the door. After she was in the room with me, I closed the door and grabbed an extra blanket out of my closet for her to sleep on. I put it at the end of my bed, that way I didn't step on her when I got up in the morning. She curled right up and seemed to fall asleep instantly. I walked into the bathroom that connected to my room and undressed and brushed my teeth. I looked at my twin bed and felt comforted by seeing her laying at the end of it. I'm not sure what happened this afternoon, but I am thankful. Chapter 5. The Cure. The next day was my cardiac appointment. I always hated going there because I'm scared of when I'll have to get surgery. I woke up in the morning less anxious than I usually was, but still nervous. I slowly climbed out of my pink silk covers and put my feet on the floor. I rubbed my feet into the carpet to relax myself while I tried not to think about going to my appointment. I got up to get dressed and then remembered that Xavier was here. I rushed to the end of my bed and saw that she was sitting there looking up at me like she was just waiting for me to get ready. Her big brown eyes were full of reassurance that I was going to be okay. I got down on the blanket with her and gave her a big hug around her neck. "I'm so glad I found you," I whispered to her as I hugged her. I stood up off the blanket and went to my dresser to get dressed. I always wore jeans and a flowy shirt when going because of the equipment they had to hook me up to. I try and look nice when I go out of the house because it makes me feel more normal like everyone else. I get to my bedroom door and see that Xavier is waiting by the steps for me. I quickly go into the bathroom to brush my teeth and then head downstairs with her. Mom and Dad had already cooked breakfast for us. They always made a big breakfast to make the mornings seem more fun. Today they made cherry crepes, scrambled eggs, and waffles. It was delicious. We ended up feeding Xavier some of the lunch meat out of the fridge again. She ate it up gratefully and had some water. "Sweetie, do you have everything you need? Do you remember what you need to tell the doctor?" My mom asked. I told her yeah as I grabbed my backpack that had my medical journal in it. Whenever I had episodes, I wrote them down in this journal and gave it to the doctor at my appointments, so we knew how far along my conditions progressed. We locked up Xavier in the kitchen with access to the backyard before we left in case she tried to tear things up in the house. I gave her a pat and a kiss on the head, and then followed Mom and Dad out the door. It's about an hour drive to my doctor, which I usually dread because it gives me way too much time to think about death and my condition. Today was different. After I gave Xavier a kiss on the head, I felt a wave of calm rush over me. The whole drive, I had no thoughts go through my head. I was completely at peace. Mom and Dad talked in the front seat per usual about my condition and about what they need to tell the doctor, but I paid no mind to it. I just stared out my window at the sky. We arrived and parked in the parking garage that belonged to the hospital. St. John's Hospital is where my doctor resided. It was a huge city hospital an hour south of Theo. We decided to come here because of the genetic research they did with kids, along with the great cardiac program they have. My doctor, Dr. Wayne Spellman, was also known for being one of the best cardiologists in Ohio. He knew my parents from college where they all shared a love for genetics. After we parked, we went to the glass elevator in the parking garage that took us up to the 10th floor where my doctor was located. No one talked. Normally we were all in our heads dreading the diagnosis from my doctor, but today was different for me. I was actually enjoying the view out of the elevator. The elevator made a huge ding as the doors opened up to reveal a large lobby that had 4 doctor's offices in it. Me and my dad went to the corner to sit down while my mom went up to the receptionist to check us in. Since my doctor is so well known, sometimes we wait for 3 hours or more to see him. Today was no different. Dad and I goofed around and played with the games they had for the kids in the lobby while Mom watched TV. They normally had soap operas on or the History Channel. As me and my dad finished up another game of tic-tac-toe, the nurse called us back to private rooms. She checked my vitals and then checked me into the room. Normally we had another hour in my room waiting, but my dad was able to spin me on the doctor's swivel chair a couple times before he walked in. I always enjoyed seeing Dr. Spellman, even under sad circumstances. He had a southern accent and called me a sweet belle patient because he said I'm always so sweet. He opened the door to the exam room and chuckled at me and my dad spinning in his chair. "I see my sweet belle patient is feeling well today, huh?" he said in a southern accent as his glasses slid down his large nose. He was way shorter than my dad at about 5'4" and in his 60s and was bald. He was a typical little southern man. I loved seeing him. He really made me feel special, which was nice because I'm isolated normally. The nurse came in after him and talked to him about my vitals. He nodded his head and smiled at her as she handed him my chart and walked out. "I see your vitals are looking good today. How are you feeling?" he said to me. I explained that my episodes were getting worse and more frequent, but that I hadn't had one today. I felt really good today. I handed him my journal and he flicked through it briefly. His eyebrows furrowed as he got to the end. "Lay down on the table for me. I'm going to listen to your heart," he said after he put the journal down on the counter. He put the stethoscope to my chest. "Well, you're not having any palpitations and your heart rate sounds good. I can't even hear any dysfunction like usual." He sat me up and turned around to my parents and scheduled a couple tests to look at my heart further to see how it looks from an inside perspective. My test took another 2 hours and then we were finally done. It was an odd day. Mom and Dad kept looking at me and asking me how I felt, and I was actually honest when I said I was doing good. Mom rubbed my back as we got back into the glass elevator to go to the parking garage. My parents kept exchanging glances at each other the rest of the way home. I could tell they were uneasy and thought I wasn't being honest with them about how I was feeling. We walked in the door and Xavier was laying in the middle of the backyard sleeping. Nothing was destroyed or out of place. I immediately set my backpack down and ran out into the backyard to snuggle Xavier. She was smiling at me again. The sun made her seem so bright. I got down on my knees in the grass and put my arms around her neck for a big hug. She nuzzled right into me. A week had passed since my appointment. I still hadn't had an episode and I was feeling better than ever. Xavier was officially a part of our family. She had a dog bed in my room and her own food downstairs in the kitchen. Mom and Dad even took a liking to her and would cook her fresh food along with ours for dinner some nights. Life was good. 8 days after my appointment, my doctor called my mom with my test results. She took the call in the kitchen as she was cooking our dinner and stopped what she was doing. She sat down. For the first time in a while, I felt my stomach drop. I wondered what the bad news was. Mom hung up the phone and started crying. She looked at me with concerned eyes as my dad came up to me and guided me to the kitchen table where she was sitting. I stood beside her and gave her a hug. I was too nervous to sit down. She grabbed my hand and said, "Lily, this is amazing news. The doctor said a miracle happened. Your test came back and your heart is completely healed. Somehow, some way, you no longer have a heart condition." I stood there confused. How though? I've been feeling fine, but how is this possible? I asked her. Tears started rolling down my cheeks before I realized what I felt. Normally when I cried, I would go into an episode within 30 seconds. Yet now my heart is reacting to it normally. It's still beating fine, so this must be true. Xavier was by my leg, wagging her tail, looking up at me. I bent down and gave her a big hug. I held her while she nuzzled into my neck for a while. I glanced up at my mom and dad and saw them hugging each other and calling some of my close family members. It's a miracle. I'm finally free. I'm going to live. Mom and Dad came over to me and pulled me close. Xavier even joined in on the family hug as we stood in the kitchen holding each other. It was the night that changed my life. As I got ready for bed, I was still in shock. I can't believe I'm healed. How is this possible? I went into my room where Xavier was sitting by my bed waiting for me to get in. She's gotten in this habit where she lays her head on the bed by me until I fall asleep, and then goes to her dog bed to sleep herself. I crawled into bed. Tonight she put her head on my chest. I put my hand on her head that's leaning on my chest and stroked her ears. Everything changed when she came along. It's been so surreal. The day I found her was strange yet beautiful. I don't know what happened to me, but I'm grateful. You know what, Xavier? I think you were my heart healer, I said to her. She wagged her tail and licked me on my hand. Then for a second it was like she winked at me. I gave her another kiss on her head and scratched her head until I dozed off to sleep. Chapter 6, Epilogue. This is the last chapter. As Lily grew up, she continued to stay healed. Within a month of her cleared diagnosis, she was able to return to school. She was even allowed to bring Xavier to school as she was registered as an emotional support dog. All the teachers loved Xavier, and the kids loved to play with her during recess and lunchtime. Lily reunited with her friends and even made some new ones. As she grew up, she graduated high school and chose to follow her parents' footsteps and go to college to study science. She focused on genetics and the cardiac system. By the time she was a junior in college, she found a passion and a determination to heal others' hearts like hers was magically healed. After graduation, she went to graduate school and worked in a research lab where she became a part of her own research. She studied her genetics and her blood to try and determine how she was healed. It turned out her body was able to produce some new chemical that was able to heal organs in the human body. She was able to extract this chemical and developed a drug that other heart patients could take. She ended up winning the Nobel Prize for Science, and went on to save millions of heart patients' lives. Xavier, of course, was with her the whole time. Xavier was in college with her and in her research laboratory as she performed her research and developed this miracle drug. Lily never married, but stayed in a small house she built outside of Theo with Xavier. As she neared the end of her life, she stopped working and instead focused on writing her story down so that everyone knew about that magical day that happened to her. After all, she never did tell anyone how she found Xavier. When Lily neared her late 90s, she finally finished her story. It was said that she passed away peacefully at 98. She was found by a younger doctor of hers that she had helped mentor some years ago. When they found Lily passed away peacefully in her bed, it was said that Xavier had also passed away. When they were found, Xavier was lying on Lily's torso with her head on her chest. They were embraced in a hug. It was the life of Lily that forever changed the world, yet she always credited Xavier for being the real heart healer.